I want to tell you a story from when I was very young. I first got my camera from my grandma at the time, soon before she died of having cancer. She gave me this camera, and I had never had anything like that before. I had never been entrusted with, something so expensive and important. So having that camera, it meant a lot to me. And her giving it to me, I was about 7 at the time, if I recall correctly. Um, or maybe I was, yeah, I think I was 7 because I think she died in 2009. Time, it flies so much, but she gave me this camera, and it was very symbolic to me, even as a young kid, knowing that she cared enough about me and entrusted me with something enough to give me such an expensive item, even though it was, she was passing away and it was just a random thing that she had in her arsenal. But the fact that she gave it to me meant a lot to me. And I distinctly remember the first recording that I made with that camera was me running down the field that we had at our house. And what it was I was kind of like spying on the neighbors. I was doing this weird trick where my brother was getting particularly mad at me at the time because he thought I was being like a weird creep. But what I would do was I would just run down and be like, "Ooh, man, we're spying on the neighbors, guys. This is what we're doing today." And I think I was just trying to like be a meme. I don't think my intention was not to actually spy on them. I was just sort of treating the act of getting that footage as a joke while also getting the footage. Um, so that was the first thing that I did with my camera. I took a few other pictures, but I think most of those don't exist, and they don't exist in my memory as a result. But that was the first thing that I did, and ever since then, there were a lot of images that I took, there were a lot of videos that I took that simply just don't exist anymore. Because I was really bad about keeping space where I would save things on the internal memory and not copy it over the computer. For a while, I didn't even know that functionality was there. So, there was a lot of honestly kind of decent images, if I remember correctly, that I just lost to the ether. And so that kind of sucks. But there is a lot of it that I did save, and I've been looking through these on my Google Drive and through various CDs that I have just kind of around. And I noticed that there was this continual facet throughout all of them of just filming random ass things in the house. None of this was ever uploaded. None of this was ever meant for anyone but myself. I filmed things because I liked to film things. And all of it was just like this random ass bullshit. Sometimes I would make a story out of it. Sometimes I would film things around the house and make voices and try and build some kind of meta narrative out of it. But by and large, it was like me taking pictures of the faucet, me taking videos of me walking around in my room, and if there was like a subtle change in the house, I would film that subtle change because I wanted to have it archived. Even back then, I was autistic about archiving everything. And so I wanted every single aspect of my house saved. I wanted every single aspect there forever, so I would never forget. If there was an event going on in the house, if there was some kind of interaction, I would sometimes film it without people knowing. And let me tell you, that was something that I was punished for in some small extent. Not necessarily punished, more so just like ridiculed. Like, what the fuck are you doing here? Why are you filming us talking? This is weird. Don't film your parent. That was always a big rule back then. Never film your parents talking, and I had to stand by that because I would just like sneak up around and just film people doing things. And I was a young kid at the time. I was like 8 years old, 9 years old. 7, things like that. So it's not like I really knew any better. I was just very enthusiastic about the act of filming things and about the act of archival. But I would definitely like film my brother making sandwiches and stuff like that, or film my sister playing with her toys. She seemed to really like it 'cause she was like 3. Um, but like, yeah, it's at the time I was just way into having all these things archived. And I don't think that's a thing a lot of people do. Like, especially as little kids, no one cares about just archiving these things for yourself. Never tried to make it interesting. Inherently, people were interesting to me. Inherently, having every little bitty thing in someone's life was interesting to me. And so I wanted to keep it all. Um, I think that's something that's kind of degraded as I've gotten older. As I've gotten older, I've started to think less about just the tiny little details in people's lives. I still love it, by and large, my YouTube channel is a reflection of wanting to archive little things in my own life. And a lot of the YouTube channels that I watch are that way. My, 2 of my favorite YouTubers, Hiding in My Room and Digibro, much of their appeal to me is just how much of their life they archive. With Hiding in My Room especially, he'll like take videos of himself in the fucking grocery store. He'll take videos of himself making food and just doing mundane tasks, but the strength of his personality is there. It's not just entirely mundane. Oh God, cough. Um, Yeah, so I kind of need some minor personality injected into it, but I do think to a very large extent I'm still very much into just this archival of people's lives and of people's personalities. Um, I don't necessarily do that with like every random person as much, but I definitely like it with people who have interesting personalities, like Daniel from Hiding in My Room. That dude, that dude's life is whack. So watching him just do random things in his life that are kind of mundane are fascinating to me because I want to see more of this fascinating character at any cost. Um, and I think the little things in people's lives, even back then I thought this, I didn't know how to articulate it, but I definitely thought this, that the little things in people's lives say a lot about them. They say a lot about them as people. And if we can look at these little details, we can begin to discern and pick apart who they are. And I just find that stuff absolutely fascinating. I really love that. And so, um, those types of videos that are just going headfirst into people's lives are always some of my favorite things. Because I just want to know every little bit of someone's psychology, every little bit of someone's brain. I want to pick it all apart with a knife and a fork. I'm gonna eat it. That's what I'm gonna do. Um, so even back then, it's been an aspect of my tastes. And I think there are several things to this, because I've been talking a lot about just understanding other people, but what's the appeal of me keeping these things for myself? So, for some reason, my phone camera just like cut out. Every random little bit, it'll like have this ad pop up because it's my mom's phone and I have no idea what she's doing with it. But in any case, um, so what is the point of me archiving everything about myself when I already understand myself better than anybody and I don't find my own life particularly interesting at all? Um, I think the 2 appeals here are separate because, as I said, I never uploaded any of this stuff onto the internet because it is the kind of content that I want. Hiding in My Room, stuff like that, that just are very mundane aspects of people's lives, are the content that I want. It was the content that I was making. But I wasn't making it entirely just for that reason. I was making it to have an archive. It wasn't made to completely understand people. It was also just made for myself to remember these things. And I think there are several reasons behind this. Um, as we grow older, we begin to change and we begin to shape into new people. And I have certainly seen this all throughout my life. Every couple of months, I would say, I change in some kind of massive way, or I learn a bunch of new things about how to do things just better in my own life. And then when I look off out to the stuff that I said a few months ago, I just feel weird. Like, it feels like a totally different person is talking. And so it's completely fascinating to me just to have this weird, bizarre character that was me and how I learned from that character. And they can still exist. They can still exist in the world, and I can still sit here and think about exactly how different I am and in all the different ways. Because with a recording, I have everything there. I have all of the tools to understand how I've changed because the old me is just right there. I'm not going off of memories which could potentially be biased. I am just looking at a physical representation of what I was. And I think that's very valuable for self-reflection, which is something I do a lot of. I would say like 90% of my day is just reflecting on myself and how I could do things better and how I got to this point. I'm always thinking about early life experiences and about how things have shaped me. And so when I look at these old recordings, um, I become deeply fascinated by them just because there's so many details to go off of as to how I've changed, how that might have been facilitated, what exactly made me that way at the time. I absolutely eat that stuff up. And so, um, I think it's very, very valuable to have that. And if you were a certain way at the time as well, and you did something fun, and you want to keep that forever, then you can always just revisit that fun thing you did at the time. Like, I would say with every arc of me as a person, with every way that I change, there's always new fun things that happen, right? There's always good things that come out of it. But there were different good things 7 months ago. I was recently listening to Make Videos Larva episode 3. Larva becomes a skeptic YouTuber, which is a really good podcast. I really like that podcast because it basically takes an absolutely like normal conversation and then turns it into just a recording. Like, no one was treating it like a podcast. It flowed completely naturally. There was no topic or anything like that. But everyone's chemistry, just because we were all friends, was just bouncing off of one another and creating more content. Until the point where it basically felt like people forgot there was a recording at all. Because back in the day, those recordings were recorded so nonchalantly. Sometimes they were just recorded in the background, where we would use a Discord bot, which people could physically see and know they're being recorded. But, I mean, sometimes there wasn't. Sometimes it was just Audacity or OBS or something that was being recorded, and half the people in the call didn't know until after it was recorded, you know? So it felt very much like a natural experience. And I was just listening to like some of the jokes that were being made by the people in that call that I don't think would have been made now. Not necessarily due to like relevance or something, but that is one of them, which is a whole other thing to talk about. But like, just who the people were at the time, who I was at the time, our chemistry would never be able to work like that again, just because that event cannot happen because we have all changed. Um, and so to be able to relive those experiences that I had at the time, is really cool. I can laugh at them still, you know, I can still look at them and say this was fun, and I can vicariously relive those things. Because what is a podcast but a parasocial relationship, but a vicarious experience of someone's life? And I can vicariously experience my past now. And I can look at it and say this is enjoyable instead of just forgetting it ever happened and not being able to enjoy those things anymore. Um, like, if I sat here and I didn't remember entirely what happened that call, but I kind of just vaguely, faintly remembered it. Those experiences are now gone. They don't exist anymore because they're not in my realm of perception. And so, if I just have a recording of the natural experience, I can just always go back to it and I can always feel it. And even though I've changed, that experience still exists. And so I think it's very, very valuable to have, just because I care a lot about remembering those things. I don't want them to die. I don't want them to go away. I care a lot about just having them. And I think this autistic obsession of mine has kind of butted heads with others in the past, and so I've kind of stopped doing that whole meme of like, oh man, everybody, let's record something now, because people, they just want to have a natural conversation, which I mean is totally fair. I don't need to always just be recording everything to that degree, but I don't regret having done it at the time. Because ultimately it did create a lot of really cool things, but it's not like I would ever do that again. But yeah, it's just something that I find a lot of value in on a very, very personal level. One of my biggest existential terrors is to forget everything, is to forget all of the people I've interacted with, is to forget every house that I've been in, is to forget all of the good times that I've had. And it's a double-edged sword, because in many ways I would gladly forget all of the bad things that I've done, all of the bad things that have happened to me, because every time I remember them, it hurts me very deeply. It's as if I'm reliving that experience. And, sometimes I will just break down and cry if the situation is right and if I remember the right thing. A lot of the time it affects my personal life. A lot of the time it affects my everyday, remembering these things. And so, there's a lot of things that I would like to be left forgotten and in a void, as if they didn't exist. But at the same time with that, I did learn from them, and I do learn from them still, and if I forgot them, I wouldn't have that capacity to tell the story of I was someone who came from this, and now I'm here. So it's a very double-edged sword. I like being able to tell that story and to be able to say that I am someone who has improved. And I think it's almost a coping mechanism of having those memories. If you can improve yourself, you can begin to feel less guilty for the things you've done in the past. You can begin to cope with them existing, because you can say, I am this way now. I could have been that. I could have been that thing over there, but I'm not anymore. I'm me. And I think there's something very deeply powerful to doing that. Of course, the effects of those memories, the effects that they've left on me are very much there. The effects of the things that I've done, that others have done to me, they still bother me to an extent. But I also think that there's something very cathartic and euphoric about knowing how much I've changed. And so, with that, I'm kind of ambiguous on the whole thing. But good memories, this is not an ambiguous topic whatsoever. I don't want to forget my good memories. Even just like my half-normal memories. My half-normal memories are like so much better than my bad ones that I would happily just live normally without, much of anything going on. It's way better than feeling bad. Just kind of chilling out and feeling normal is in itself a great experience to remember, is in itself very good. And so I think I kind of feel things in extremes to an extent, if that makes any sense. Like, feeling normal is feeling really good to me because I know how sad I could be. So like, in a lot of ways I just kind of want to keep all of the good stuff archived to just never forget it, because I don't want to have everything that I remember to be bad, because I'm a bit negativistic. A lot of the things that I think about are bad. I don't want that to be the case. I want all of my thoughts to be good and pure and nice, and if something good happened, if a fun time happened, I want to remember that fun time. I want to be able to look back on that fun time fondly and keep making more of those fun times, you know? And so I don't want to forget them because they're too good to be forgotten. They're too meaningful. They mean too much to me. All of my good interactions with my friends, you don't understand this. All of my good interactions with my friends mean something very deeply to me. Every single time I have a nice conversation with a friend, I feel a deep sense of emotional gratification and satisfaction. And I want to keep that. I want to remember that. I want to remember that those things happened and to be able to go back and listen to them again and to be able to experience them and be like, whoa, dude, I was doing this at one point. This feels nice, you know? This can happen again. There's the capacity for it to exist is there. I don't know if this is making any sense. I think a lot of the emotional bias for this that I have is very irrational, but I don't want to ever forget that these things happen because I need to have good and bad memories. I can't just have one. And I want to be able to remember more of the good than remembering the bad. I would rather have more good than bad in my ability to experience memories. I would never record a bad situation, you know. If it's a bad situation, it's gonna be deleted in a lot of cases, unless I would think it poses value to someone else. Certainly doesn't pose value to me, because that's a bad situation. I don't want to remember that. I don't know if this is making any sense. I'm kind of contradicting myself, but the bias is just so emotional here that it's almost kind of hard to explain. But bear with me. It's a thing. Oh boy. I don't know, man. I don't like the idea of forgetting and shit. I don't like the idea of not being able to vicariously experience the good parts of my life. It's like wanting to keep a photo of someone who died around because you want to remember the good parts of their life. You want to remember all of the times you spent with them. Because when you remember those things, it's as if you're experiencing them again, at least to some extent. You remember things good have happened in your life, and so your view of life begins to shift a bit. If you're upset, you know that those things can happen again. I don't know anything about psychology. I'm just explaining how I feel on these things. And I don't know. Maybe someone will find it interesting.